Begin. I'd just like to say a few words about civility. We're here to have a discussion with a great conservative thinker. I encourage challenging questions. That's why we have all our events. Some people don't think that, but we come here, we bring an alternative thought that's not here, so I ask that you be respectful. If you're disrupting, we're going to give you a warning. If the disruptions continue, you're going to be removed and the cops are going to be called. So, with that, before I introduce our very special guest, I'd just like to say thank a few people. So I'd like to thank Young America's Foundation for helping make these and other events like this possible. I'd also like to thank the team at PragerU and the No Safe Spaces film for all they're doing to expose college students across the United States to viewpoints that aren't usually expressed on college campuses. And finally, I would like to thank the members of the Berkeley College Republicans. We're always ready to help at a moment's notice to successfully pull off all of our events, so really thank you guys. Let's get another round of applause. Now it is my great honor to introduce one of the preeminent thinkers of our time. He's a nationally syndicated radio host, an author, and an expert in music, religion, and of course, society and politics. He artfully describes the dangers of atheism, victimhood, and big government. He's a true conservative intellectual. He's someone who appreciates clarity above agreement, so we know that we will get an honest discussion tonight. I'm very happy to present to everyone Mr. Dennis Prager.
Before my wonderful co-dialoguers with me, I want to say I was very self-conscious earlier because when the three of us came out, there was applause, and I'm going like this, and thinking maybe it's for them. And so I just want you to know, I'm not arrogant, I just assumed I'm better known, so maybe that was the reason, but I did feel self-conscious, since for all I knew, none of it was for me. But anyway, just give you an idea what goes on in my brain. So listen, here we are at Berkeley, which is maybe unfairly has a reputation among a fair number of Americans as somewhat intellectually closed. Whether that's true or not is one of the things I'd like to raise with these two gentlemen. These are fellow students of yours, if you're a student here at Berkeley, and they are left of center, I am right of center, obviously. And my hope is that we could clarify where we differ. I have a motto on my show, which you just heard in the lovely introduction, for which I am grateful. I prefer clarity to agreement. I have never sought to win an argument in 35 years of radio, and I argue a lot. I've always sought to clarify where it is we differ. Half the time, interestingly, what happens is it will end with, so it doesn't really seem like we differ a lot at all, does it? And then the caller will say, I guess not. That's the beauty of aiming for clarity rather than winning. Sometimes you have to win. I mean, when I debated at Oxford, I wanted to win because I was debating against people I thought held a horrible, morally horrible position. But normally, it's just, I believe my way, you believe yours. Let's figure out where we differ. By the way, even though a few of you are married, I presume, it's a great idea for couples to pursue clarity over agreement. So, honey, where exactly is it that we differ? Might not work all the time, but couples have told me that it has really reduced tension in an argument. Before we fight, let's figure out where we really differ. Anyway, so that's my hope for the evening. I will pose some issues. They are totally free to pose some issues. So, and I'm going to ask them first to introduce themselves because they'll do a much better job of doing so. So, Dave and John, please come out. So give everybody your full name and tell them what you're doing.
Hi, I am John Rider. I am a second-year student here at the University of California. I study geography and American studies, which is an interdisciplinary humanities degree. I write for the Berkeley Political Review, and I'm on the board of directors for an organization here called Bridge USA, which is involved in getting partisan opposites together in the same room and actually engaging with each other on a fairly similar model to what we have here today, which is exciting. I lean pretty left in my own politics, and it's funny because it's the first time that I've felt like that's a minority opinion in a room at Berkeley. So
That's honest. No, that's a very honest approach.
Hi, I'm David Lowens. I'm, like John, a second year. I'm an industrial engineering and operations research major. Don't worry if you don't know what that is, most people don't. I'm also a member of the Berkeley Political Review and a member of Bridge USA, so not a lot else is different.
Great, guys. Thank you very much. And by the way, I established earlier their bona fides on that. When I asked who did you vote for in the election, not only did they say Hillary Clinton, but the reaction, tell me if I'm wrong, was as if you got to be kidding. All right, so I want to make that clear. They're the real deal. We weren't looking for people who might say they're left of center, but really have a MAGA hat at home. All right. So if you guys feel totally free to ask me or challenge me, and I'll feel free to you, but I have a list of subjects. So let's begin with the most obvious one, especially at Berkeley, and that's free speech. So is it fair to say that do you believe, as I do, that there is a threat to free speech on American campuses generally?
Well, I'd ask you to clarify what you mean by a threat to free speech, and specifically on American campus.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
If Ann Coulter, who's a very prominent right-wing pundit, and whatever you think of her, I believe she's one of the few people I would call brilliant. And when she goes to a campus, she needs armed guards. I am unaware of any equivalent on the left, no matter how far left, that they need armed guards. I am unaware of any riots that conservative students have ever created to stop a left-wing speaker. It's always in one direction. So that's what I specifically mean.
Okay. Yeah, I would say that there, to a degree, is threat to speakers like Ann Coulter, but importantly, I would clarify that that doesn't actually come from the campus community itself. We were involved actually in the invitation of Ann Coulter to campus over this past semester, our organization, Bridge USA, and so we got some insight into the process, and there were threats against her practice of speech on campus. But insofar as we know, and from our experience on campus, we didn't see those coming from students. Importantly, those coming from provocateurs from off campus. I myself, for example, was on the ground during the Milo riots and distinctly recall the rioters shouting out in anger at the OPD, the Oakland Police Department, before realizing swiftly that they were in Berkeley and then correcting their chant against the PD. So, insofar as institutions like the University of California are concerned, I think that they are doing a very admirable job of trying to guarantee the right to free speech to any individual who wants to come here and practice that right in a manner that is responsible and protected. But there are threats to their speech. I just don't think it is a problem exclusive to university campuses.
Okay, it may not be exclusive to university campuses, but to the extent that it exists, it's an anti-right thing. I'm not going to belabor a thing. Did you want to add anything to that? Okay, so I'll go to one other aspect of this. I get calls from parents and students on my radio show. This is a typical call. Dennis, what should I say to my daughter? She's at XYZ college or university, and she knows that if she writes her opinion, which is conservative, she will get a lesser grade. By the way, I just want to note the answer that I always give to parents who ask this of me, and it shows it's been asked so often that I have a standard answer. You don't have a standard answer to something asked only once. And I say, this is what I would say to your daughter if she were to ask me. If you're going to compromise on your values for a grade in college, when won't you compromise on your values in life? So I don't think one should shut up about one's views for a better grade, but that's, it's easy for me to say. It's a long time ago since I was in graduate school. But that is the perception, and it's not just the perception. Every poll shows the vast majority of professors in the liberal arts are on the left. And unless you think they are all truly noble and welcome alternate views, that too is part of a quiet suppression of speech.
It's not to say that these liberal professors are inherently trying to push down speech. Like you've cited, like very often the fact that there are a unprecedented amount of liberal professors, leftist professors versus liberal professors. But at the end of the day, that these kind of individuals are very intelligent, and they've sculpted their own personal arguments and their own personal agenda out of spending a lot of time with their own community trying to have to argue out the kind of research that they want to show to us. And so in many ways, we have to take into account that the research that is showing is in fact coming through conservative eyes at some point or another. It is being rigorously sought after, and so it really must, if I got the same kind of question that you did on the radio show, I would say immediately that the first thing that the student should do is to go into office hours and to talk to the professor about it. Because at the end of the day, both sides can be able to see the different kind of conversation which is going on the particular subject matter. So they can really come to a different conclusion, which I don't think will always compromise a conservative student's views, while at the same time being relevant to the curriculum.
All right, again, go on.
Yeah, no, I'd like to expand on that because I think a lot of what David says is important, but I'd also like to point out at Berkeley, which, barring basically Evergreen State, I think is represented as the most left campus in the nation. I know plenty of conservative students who do not balk at sharing their opinions and are rewarded because of the intellectual rigor that they put into actually defending those opinions. In the front row, for example, I see my friends Prager and John Carolla and Patrick Boldia, two students who are also second years here, who I would say it's fairly safe to say get phenomenal grades at this institution. You are certainly challenged for your political leaning. I've seen it happen, but I've also seen you refuse to balk from that challenge and not explicitly be punished for it. I can think of another student, for example, named Alex Lee here, who has a perfect GPA, and at Cal, that is a hard thing to do. And he is fervently conservative.
Good.
Yeah, okay. I would say it's a product of representation.
So one more aspect of college life, and that is said to me earlier, doing a video for the movie Adam Carolla and I are making called No Safe Spaces. He said, if it were known to most fellow students here at Berkeley that he voted for Donald Trump, he would be almost universally hated. Do you think he's paranoid, or do you think that there is legitimacy to that sentiment?
I disagree with that sentiment wholeheartedly. First of all, you can't make any universal claims with a student body that's 26,000 people.
Well, you can make a universal claim with the understanding that all generalizations have exceptions.
Yeah.
The 5 people who died in the helicopter crash in the East River in New York all died because they wore seatbelts. But it's still fair to say that seatbelts save lives. So exceptions don't matter. As a general rule, you don't think that I'm asking, I'm not asserting, you don't think that if it were known you voted for Donald Trump, there would be social ramifications at this university?
Well, I would respond back with that to say that of the 26,000 students here, it is the exceptional cases that make the media representation of this place. Those individuals who would leverage some social repercussions against an individual for voting for Donald Trump are few and far between on this campus. The truth of the matter is a lot of the problem we have on this campus, earnestly, is political apathy towards the respective extremes. Now, what happens when we have these extremes representing our campus is that feelings like this are inculcated. But that is the fault of a media that likes to profiteer off the narrative that Berkeley is a leftist hive mind.
So let me ask the crowd, okay? Raise your hand if you think if a student wrote a piece for the Berkeley paper, this is why I voted for Donald Trump, there would be severe social ramifications as a result. Raise your hand.
I'd ask you to put your hand down if you're not a student here.
Okay, only students here, fine. Students who are here who don't think there would be any social ramification, like, raise your hands. Okay, so, all right, look, it was not a scientifically chosen audience, I fully acknowledge that, but all right, I just wanted to go, all right, we'll move on because there's so many subjects in limited time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll figure out where, all right, so I think we differ on the social ramifications of being known as a Trump supporter. Let me just say where I come from. This is important. I conducted, as an avocation conduct orchestras. I'm very involved in classical music. So I conducted the Santa Monica Symphony Orchestra last summer at the Walt Disney Concert Hall. And it got some national attention, but that's not what is important. What is important is the number of emails I received after I was attacked in the New York Times and NPR and so on. And what's a conservative doing conducting, you know, a liberal city's orchestra, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, it was very sad, the number of members of some of the most prestigious orchestras in the United States of America who wrote to me, like this violist, and I won't say which, obviously, orchestra. She has been in the orchestra for more than 30 years. Not one person in the orchestra knows she voted for Donald Trump. Her life would end. She would not be fired, but she would lose her friends in the orchestra after 30 years if it were known. So I have come up with the term Marranos. I taught Jewish history at Berkeley College. It's an area I'm well acquainted with. Marranos were Jews who hid that they were Jewish during the Spanish Inquisition, acted Catholic on the outside and Jewish at home. America has tens of millions, I believe, of conservative Marranos. People who are conservative in private and who don't allow anybody to know about that. Does this sound bizarre to you, or do you believe that it's true?
I think it's bizarre, but I'd also like to bring up how many Marranos would probably exist from the leftist side. At the end of the day, that this is just a part of the larger problem of the kind of polarization that we're seeing in this country, and why we honestly need to try and confront it. It's because we have gotten to the point where people can no longer be frank about the ideologies and the perspectives that they do want to talk about. Because we are pushed to the point where you need to either where we want homogeneity within our own ideological perspectives.
Yeah, and I would fire back that I actually have experience with that as well. I grew up within a mile as the crow flies to the Reagan Library. That was not the most left community. Now that being said, I never bulged from my principles, but importantly, I would argue for every conservative Marrano, there is a corollary left Marrano. At the end of the day, when you look at the actual margin of the population of voters we had for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and if we look at the ideological bubbling that happens in the United States, Bill Bryson wrote an excellent book about this, there are communities, corollaries to one another, that are predominantly Democrat, predominantly Republican, and you will always have your exceptions within those communities that, because they are the minority opinion, will feel threatened.
Okay, so there's a great example of clarity over agreement. We clearly differ on that. I don't think the ratio, I think the ratio of conservative Marranos to left-wing Marranos is 1,000 to 1. Okay, but all right, so we're on the record. I'll give you one example. New York Times had a piece, front page, a month after the election of Donald Trump. And it was about how many families are disrupted for their Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners that year because of voting for different candidates in this election. The New York Times article itself gave in every single instance the example but one where it was the Hillary voter who wouldn't visit the parents or the friends or the cousins who voted for Trump, not vice versa.
I think you would have to interrogate the values involved in that. I would argue that conservatism is generally more of a family-forward ideology. Would you agree with that?
A more family-friendly? That's what you said?
I would say as a base political unit,
yeah.
Conservatism is primarily orchestrated around the family.
Oh yes, absolutely.
I would argue that
it's one of our prides and joys. Yeah.
That's fair. And
yeah.
I would retort back to that I would retort back to that generally speaking, liberal and left ideologies value more communities of selection. For example, not those who you are born with, but those whom you surround yourselves with.
Okay, it's a very beautiful way of saying that if there's going to be disruption in a family and the hurting of parents or siblings, it's going to come from the left if it's ideologically oriented.
No, I agree. Okay, I agree with that. That's a bit of a misrepresentation.
You said it. I don't think, why was it a misrepresentation?
because I was going to say those